Good evening, everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you and welcome you to the Killeen Chair for Theology and Philosophy lecture series. My name is Karen Park, professor of Theology and Religious Studies here at St. Norbert College, and I serve as the chair of the Killeen Chair Committee. So welcome to our final Killeen lecture of the academic year on the theme of community and technology, which will be delivered by Sister Ilia Delio, the Joseph Connelly Endowed Chair of Theology at Villanova University. So this is our last event of this year, and we thank you for attending. I wanted to mention just briefly that next year we will be beginning a new lecture series. Our theme will be Must We Speak? Civic Responsibility in Times of Polarization. We have an impressive slate of speakers lined up. This includes the eminent philosopher Martha Nussbaum. These speakers will be approaching philosophical and theological questions surrounding the issue of civility, tolerance, and the prophetic call to justice. So I hope that you will watch your mail and keep in mind the lecture series next year. I think it's going to be excellent. Following our lecture this evening, we'll have a brief period of question and answer. If after the question and answer period, you wish to continue the conversation further, we would invite you to the lobby just outside this auditorium for some light refreshments, and we will also have Dr. Delio's books for sale at that time. I'd now like to invite my colleague in physics, Dr. Eric Brecky, to introduce our speaker.
Good evening. I'm extremely excited tonight to introduce Sister Ilia Delio, the Josephine C. Connelly Endowed Chair in Theology at Villanova University. Sister Delio received a bachelor's in biology from DeSales University, a master's in biology from Seton Hall, and a doctorate in pharmacology from Rutgers University. In the midst of her research in neurotoxicology, she acted on another of her callings, joining a Carmelite monastery and eventually a Franciscan community. She then went on to pursue theology at Fordham University, earning a master's in theology and yet another doctorate in historical theology. With all of this experience, she was perfectly positioned to combine her passions into the teaching and research and the interplay of science and religion. With her expertise in neuroscience, evolution and Catholic thought, love and wholeness, transhumanism and artificial intelligence, Dr. Delio has continued with an extensive and impressive scholarly career. She has written 18 books, including The Care for Creation, A Franciscan Spirituality of Earth, The Unbearable Wholeness of Being, God, Evolution, and the Power of Love, and A Hunger for Wholeness, Space, Soul, and Transcendence. She has written articles in journals ranging from the Journal of Neurological Sciences to New Theology Review. Her presentations, workshops, and conferences at the local, national, and international level are too numerous to count and make clear that we are very fortunate to have her with us today. Please join me in welcoming Sister Ilia Delio.
Thank you very much for that very warm introduction, and thank you for coming. You have a beautiful campus here in De Pere, is that right, Wisconsin? I deal with big questions, so we're dealing with a big question this evening, and that is on artificial intelligence and the human person. When I think of the new scientific discoveries today, the recent black hole, we're all enamored by this incredible discovery. But oftentimes I think, well, where's the human person in relation to this discovery? And I think sometimes science has overpowered us. We know so much about science and the universe and so many things, but we know so little about ourselves. So my question this evening is going to deal with artificial intelligence and what we're creating and why we're creating it, what's driving us. The first question I want to ask is artificial intelligence artificial? Now, you may have an answer to that question already. But really what I want to say is the backbone of artificial intelligence is already in nature. We look at, in a sense, what we call our cosmic home, which is the universe, the expanding Big Bang universe that's been going on for 13.8 billion years. And even someone said recently, just that's not really that long of a time for a complex life to develop. I'm like, seriously, dude, you know. It's been expanding for a long time. It will expand probably indefinitely into the future. And we're just here in this expanding universe for a very brief time. It is a world of energy. And I think Albert Einstein and his incredible discoveries of the early 20th century helped us realize that matter, you know, is really a form of energy. Like there's no stuff of matter that's apart from, you might say, energy. And therefore, we came into the strange world of quantum physics. And it's really strange. I really don't understand it, so don't ask me to explain it to you. All we know is that the stuff we call matter, you know, exists in this kind of virtual state of wave-particle duality. And therefore, it requires an observer, in a sense, to determine what that thing is. And I think the one thing I get from this is that at the early 20th century, we began to realize that the role of consciousness in the determination of materiality. For the longest time, we thought that consciousness is something we humans have, and then there's matter out there. And we didn't link these two things together. And therefore, I think quantum physics has opened up for us all new studies about the mind in relation to matter. Max Planck, a great physicist at the early 20th century, said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We can't get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything we regard as existing postulates consciousness." So, you know, in a sense, what Max Planck is pointing to is no matter apart from mind, right? You can't take the mind out of matter. James Jean, another physicist in the 1950s, said, "Mind is no longer just an intruder into the realm of matter, but mind may be the creator and governor of matter." Like it matters what you're thinking. The quantum phenomenon makes it possible to propose that the background of the universe is mind-like. Now, I want you to keep this in mind, this relationship of mind and matter, and these theories that still continue to abound in the philosophies of mind today, because these are big subjects that we can't quite get our heads around. But one of the concepts posed is that, as Teilhard de Chardin, who we'll hear about this evening, a Jesuit thinker, a biologist, said, matter and consciousness are not just two substances that you can piece together, but rather two modes of existence or two aspects of the same cosmic stuff. So that you might say, mind might be the within, as Teilhard said, of what exists, and matter is the without, the physical aspect. We call this dual aspect monism. There's a single stuff that has two dimensions, so to speak, or two realms. All we're saying here is that what accounts for the human mind is active in the universe. So this is just important to keep in mind. No pun intended there. The other thing we know is we're in evolution, right? This is not a theory. It's not like, oh, really? We're in evolution? Does the Catholic Church hold that? Well, whatever. The fact is that it's a world that's dynamic, it's changing, and it's in process, right? That's all we're saying here. Evolution is a description of the way matter and mind unfold. In fact, what we realize today is that the whole course of evolution is towards greater complexity and more mind. As life intensifies, as it complexifies, consciousness increases. So evolution, you might say, is really our story. And I know it's just hard for us to get our heads around, like, you know, these are our distant relatives of some sort. But in fact, if we follow the story, that is what we're saying, right? That consciousness, mind and matter, has been, in a sense, intensifying and complexifying over millions of years. More recently, biologists, you know, have helped us understand that Darwin had some good ideas, but he wasn't maybe entirely right about natural selection, that there are other mechanisms at work in how things evolve. And one of the things we began to realize is the way biological systems work. that biological systems work as open systems, that they work as dynamical systems, right? Information is already, part and parcel of the biological life. And so what we find in nature, certainly in the realms of ecology, those of you who might work in ecology, is that we find cybernetic systems at work in local niches or local feedback systems. So this is not, not just what artificial intelligence is about. All we're saying here, and this is about as simple as it gets, nature is technological. It's been that way forever. It's techne. Techne, the word techne means crafting. Nature can kind of sort out from its environment the tools it needs to do what it needs to do. And we've always been, in a sense, transcending. That's what nature does. It finds the tools to create. It creates, and then it transcends, in a sense, what it already is. It's kind of always moving towards something. Consciousness and matter have been part of this techne process, in a sense, forever. What we know is nature has permeable boundaries. It's plastic. No fixed things, right? So we begin with simple cellular life, and then here we are after so many millions of years. It's pretty fascinating. Lynn Margulis, who was a wonderful biologist and one of the mothers of the Gaia hypothesis, says that the blurring of technology and biology is not all that new. She says the shells of clams and snails are a kind of technology dressed in biological clothing. We make a distinction between living things and the tools these things happen to create, but nature does not. That's a really interesting statement, right? Nature is a very loose term, it's an umbrella term for techne, for plasticity, for cybernetic systems and information sharing. So nature is really a social construct of multiple meanings that neither the artifice, such as the shell of the clam, or the organism, the clam itself, can in a sense symbolize. Both are nature. Now here's where our story sort of begins. We're here. Now we talked ever so briefly about evolution, but we have been on this kind of breathless trajectory of artificial intelligence, or let's say technology, since about, let's say, the 70s. I mean, I remember when the first cell phone came out. I know, really. So I was in New Jersey, and we used to have a phone on the wall, with a rotary cord. You might have had that here in Wisconsin. And someone said to me, "You're not going to believe it. They're going to make a phone that you could fit in your hands and carry around." I said, "What? That's crazy." And sure enough, this thing called a cell phone came out. It was like a foot long, and cost a lot of money. And I said, "Wow, that's amazing." And then in the 80s, they said, they're going to put a computer in a cell phone. I said, "What's a computer?" Sure enough, by the 80s was the computer, right? And things are getting smaller, smaller, smaller. And today we just take this as part and parcel of our lives. It's become seamlessly embedded. So we have this, in a sense, rise of artificial intelligence that has sort of come in upon us. Now, looking around at some of the students here, you're born into this world. So you're a different species, okay? I mean, we look alike, but I think we're, slightly different in our wiring. And I hope we can appreciate why. Don't feel bad about it at all, by the way. It's what evolution does. Artificial intelligence. Let's just look at the rise of the computer ever so briefly. Why does nature change? Why do we cross boundaries? Well, just look at the mid-20th century, when the computer as a thinking machine sort of emerged. The 20th century was marked by world wars, right? Tremendous violence, racism, the threat of nuclear power. Alan Turing, in 1950, known for The Imitation Game, right? The thinking machine. How many have seen that movie, The Imitation Game? Yeah, great movie. Turing was gay, right? He was a homosexual at a time when homosexuality was considered a crime. It was subject to punishment. Turing develops a thinking machine, not like human, but actually it's a game to see if the computer could think like a woman. It's actually a specific, it's a gender game more than a thinking game. And Turing proposed this computer game in which this man and a computer pretend to be a woman. So he was trying to cross boundaries, which is what nature does when it's up against a wall of compression, right? John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence in 1956. Now, what is it about cyberspace that's been so alluring? Well, in some ways, science began to map the heavens, right? We began to name the stars, name the planets, and there was nothing, in a sense, unknown out there. There was nothing that, hadn't been identified. And cyberspace sort of ushers in as a new cosmos, the untampered cosmos, right? The world of infinite computation, so to speak. Cybernetics develops in 1948 by Norbert Wiener as a study of how communication can work in terms of goal-oriented feedback loops. And so here we're beginning to see how nature might work as an open system, the way nature communicates with the wider environment, the way that information flows and then redounds on that which, sends it. And therefore, given all these things, we began to develop a way of strapping the biological human person to machines to, for example, go into space, right? So the term cyborg emerged in the 60s with the space exploration. As we sent men to the moon, we had to put them with oxygen tanks and things that can allow them to move. So the cyborg is a short for a cybernetic organism, right? And so a cyborg is a human who has any physiological process aided or controlled by a mechanical or electronic device. Everything from, say, your hearing aids to eyeglasses to pacemakers to knee implants, all these things count as cyborg life. So if I were to ask around the room how many cyborgs are here this evening, I should get probably a majority vote, right? So we're all a little cyborgian. What's so interesting about the cyborg as a symbol is that the boundaries of the cyborg are permeable and they're local. They only have meaning for the local embodied subject. They're not static and they're not fixed. They can be transgressed. Donna Haraway, wonderful social philosopher, in 1985, actually not interested so much in technology, but what technology was, in a sense, telling us about us, right? As a feminist philosopher, she was interested, how do we break through, you might say, the oppression of gender, right? Gender discrimination or gender ontologies. And the cyborg, in a sense, said to her that the dualisms can be disrupted, right? Anything like gender or race, or anytime we label something, we're saying that that's not fixed. You're not consigned to that forever, because the cyborg says to us, your body can be refashioned, right? It can be merged with something new. So that's what the cyborg does. As a symbol, it disrupts persistent dualisms about the body as a material entity. So what the cyborg, in a sense, holds out to us as a symbol is that the human does not possess a stable form. Oh my goodness gracious, really? But when have we ever been that stable, right? If we study evolution, we should realize this shouldn't be too shocking to us. But the cyborg signals the end of a particular understanding of the human as an autonomous individual that has a self, distinguished from the rest of nature by an individual free will, the liberal subject. And I think we have grown up with this notion of the modern liberal subject, like we're here, we think, we have the will to know, or will of power, and this is how it's always been, and this is how it should always be. And the cyborg says, not really, no. The lines between the mechanical and the biological are being erased today with technology, especially as the machine and the human form a new hybrid cyborg, in a sense transcending the limits of what we are and changing the way we think about ourselves in relation to others, to even ourselves, right? So the whole notion of personhood today and identity is in a radical revision because of a sense of cyborgian life. So one thing we can say here is that what counts as a human is not and should not be self-evident. We can no longer say this is what a human is. The process is known as cyborgization, right? So cyborg is just a symbol, a root symbol, but there's a process. So we might have eyeglasses today, right? Or a pacemaker. By maybe in 2 years, we'll have implants in our glasses, right? Or we might have a pig liver for, to help us keep going. So it's a process of continued hybridization with which whatever it is helps us to function more fully as person. And of course, where we're looking toward is a fusion of biology and technology. Now, one of the big questions, and I know Nicholas Carr was here, and he's wonderful, I love his work, is we're so enthralled with our technologies, even our cell phones, for example, right? Now, I won't ask here how many have a cell phone, because I'm going to probably see a good show of hands, right? All right? But there's something about this phone that just pulls us in. We spend all our waking hours. In fact, I'll probably say for younger generations, it's sort of your second self, right? Your second person, your exoskeletal self is in that phone. Because if I said, I'm going to take your phone and throw it in the river, you'd probably have a meltdown of some sort. So, the question is, what is it about this phone that pulls us in? If you've seen the movie Her, it's a kind of an exploration, like can these technologies, such as a cell phone or a computer, can it satisfy our deep longing for relationality? We humans are meant for relationship. We're born out of relationship, and we're intended for relationship. And what studies are finding today is that our emotional life is being reshaped with technology. That we're becoming more impatient, for one thing. Drive. I don't know how you drive here in De Pere, but driving in Philadelphia or Washington is really crazy, right? Everyone's in a rush. So everything's got to be faster, like our chips, 3G, 4G, 5G, fast lane. We're impatient. We forget. Why do you have to remember now when you can export your mind to Google, right? Google's your best friend. We're impulsive. We tend to, in a sense, wrap the world around ourselves, and we tend to be oblivious to maybe trees that we're passing or, beautiful flowers that are, by us. And what we find today is that loneliness is on the rise, which is really strange. How could we be so tied and tethered, to one another and yet increasingly lonely and depressed? And, Sherry Turkle, in her book, Alone Together, we're alone together with these technologies. Why do we expect more from our technologies and less from one another? Which is true, right? We hate talking to other people. It's like, I'll just text you, thank you. And you say, well, give me a call. Oh, no, that's okay, I'll text, or send you a tweet. So we respond to the machines as sort of role models to emulate. They're more of our best friend than our best friends. And Turkle says, as we act upon this inclination, we're becoming more isolated and lonely. Or are we? That's a big question. See, I think Turkle and Carr are, in a sense, examining this question of relationship from the point of the modern subject now who has this technology. And according to them, we're in the process of making one another disappear by living more of our lives with our cell phones and our technologies than with one another. Is that true? I guess that's really my question. That's their insight. But is it true? Are we becoming more lonely or not? Are we becoming more isolated or not with our technologies? Does cyberspace fill a void in our lives? A psychological void, a religious void? Is there something about this cyberspace that's so alluring, that it's so compelling, that I'd rather be on my Instagram and Twitter account than being at my family dinner? You know, what is it about this cyberspace that pulls us in? I think maybe one way to begin to enter into what it's doing to us is to begin to look at the trends here around AI. Now, I don't know if you've heard these terms, you might have in other talks: transhumanism, posthumanism. Are you familiar with these terms? Transhumanism, posthumanism. So in the 1990s, actually 1997, a group in Oxford, England, began to look at the way artificial intelligence was developing and saying, wow, look what this can do for us. I mean, all the dreams of enhancing ourselves can now be realized. We can become smarter. We can become happier with technology. We can increase our memory. Maybe we'll live forever with technology. There's another group that said, well, this is not about becoming smarter or happier. This is actually about getting out of our self-isolated existence of disparate and separate living. Racism, genderism, right? Racial discrimination. We have such a fragmented world. So transhumanists say technology can make us better. Posthumanists say technology can make us more connected. And I just want to look a little bit at these two trends. For one, transhumanism, I don't know, this is a pretty obvious thing, but if you look left and right, transhumanism is largely male-driven, right? It's almost the white male, if you might say. And it comes right out of the Enlightenment thinking, right? We can be the masters of our universe. We can rise up and take the power given to us and create a new self, a new person, right? The better self. Posthumanism comes mostly out of critical feminism. In a sense, women writers who are saying, how do we break through the bounds and the boundaries that have limited, gender discrimination? Break through those boundaries that have kept women back and kept all people back, you might say. Transhumanism really has its roots in the Enlightenment. Francis Bacon, if you go back to Bacon's Novum Organum, we can achieve mastery over nature, try to improve the living conditions of what we are, right? That's right out of Enlightenment thinking. Who needs God, right? Because now we can be the masters of the universe. Nick Bostrom, it's one of the founders of the World Transhumanist Association. So if you want to be a member of transhumanism, you can go to the WTA or H+ and join it. And he says, Renaissance humanism encouraged people, rely on your observations and your judgment. You don't have to listen to what the church is saying or about God. That's all silly stuff. That's what, in a sense, the Enlightenment says. I mean, who needs religion? It's a crutch. Now we have the power, right? We have the power of the mind, the power of the male mind, I might say, and transhumanists also, you might say, finds a friend in Friedrich Nietzsche. If you read Nietzsche, in his The Madman, where he says, who has killed God? We have killed God. God is dead. But now we have to become bigger than what we are. We have to become bigger than we are to live within the cavity created by the death of God. We ourselves must become gods if we are to live in this world without God. Now, this is a radical interpretation, but I do see transhumanism, in a sense, in this direction. For one, transhumanists give a privileged information to information over materiality, which contradicts, actually, what science is telling us. Science says information is already part and parcel of nature. Transhumanists say, oh no, we can extract information. We don't need materiality. Second, they say consciousness is an epiphenomenon, right? Consciousness is just something that is part of the human mind, but not intrinsic to it. Third, they say the body is just a house for the mind. That's old dualistic thinking, right? All we are is bodies and minds, and we can take our minds out of our bodies and put it into new bodies. Really? Can we really do that? And fourth, they say the seamless melding of the human and the intelligent machine is where we want to go. Who needs a biological body anyway? Such a hassle, keeps breaking down and getting sick. Why not just take out this mind and do something different with it? So I wonder, is transhumanism a shallow form of artificial intelligence? Certainly we know that we can use technologies to improve our physical and mental conditions. I mean, color blindness, deafness, biomedical areas of disabilities such as limb amputations. You can get a prosthesis, right? So there's a lot of things we can do biomedically that might count as transhumanists. But radical transhumanism says that we can wrest our own biological destiny from evolution. We can be the masters of evolution by using science and technology to overcome our limitations. So we can, with technology, you don't even have to go to college anymore, quite honestly. If you follow, yeah, I know, this could really be good for you, So join the WTA, really. You could have a brain implant of some sort. You can kind of wire yourselves up, get more memory for your exams. You can live longer, happier, be smarter, more control over your lives. Doesn't it sound appealing? Really? No, it doesn't sound appealing. Who will benefit from this? That's a big question, right? Who benefits from this technology? Who can afford this technology? Does this technology lead to greater gaps between the rich and poor, between those who have the power to do this technology and those who don't? One of the alluring things here is that transhumanists feel that technology will fulfill what religion promises. Religion, following the Enlightenment idea, is a failure. I mean, really, look where it's landed us. War, 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 disaster, disaster, disaster. Technology says now we can save ourselves. Thank God, right? Now, thank God that we can be God. So, the idea of cyber salvation. As Dan Crevier says, AI is consistent with the belief in the resurrection. Christ was resurrected in a new body. Why not a machine? Andre Jacqueline says it's like the new kingdom of God. What else can we say when the lame walk, the blind see, the deaf hear, and the dead are at least virtually alive? Right? So the aims of the gospel and artificial intelligence seem to be in accord. We can even attain heaven. I mean, those of you who play video games will know that anything is possible online, right? So you can find your eschatological paradise. If you're having a miserable life, you can go to Second Life and find your avatar, right? It's an endless, right, type of life extension into new lives. We don't just live one life; we can live many lives, with technology. And of course, where transhumanists want to go with this is they want us eventually, and this is probably true, that we will not be entirely just biological creatures, right? That we will have silicon neural interfaces. We will have brain implants, brain prosthesis, right? You will have, I do anticipate that all this technology here will be antiquated in another 10, 15, 20 years. We'll have basically implants, wearable chips, wearable stuff that we will have in our glasses, in our clothes. So we can, in a sense, we don't even have to gather, and you can imagine that the sky of imagination with technology is infinite. A nano-neural network might be more exciting for a future gathering. Ray Kurzweil, who one of the lead researchers at Google, anticipates that by 2030, We will be so welded with our technologies. We will have, in a sense, crossed a barrier, what he calls the singularity. And by 2045, he says, we will hopefully achieve digital immortality. We won't even have to die anymore. Basically, we'll be able to download our brains into chips or into new software and repackage that in new mediums. If you've seen the movie Transcendence with Johnny Depp, how many have seen the movie Transcendence, right? Yes, so one, all right. It's pretty good. You're into pair. So, right, so why worry about death, right? It's all possible, it's all manageable, all controllable by us. Martine Rothblatt anticipates that we will have a whole new language around brain downloading, mind clones. Well, we have mind clones now. You already have your mind files, right, in your Facebook pages or your social media sites, in your phones. These mind files will be cloned, right? We can make replications of them. We'll have mindware. And it just sounds so like otherworldly. Right? It just sounds so incredible. And all of this, by the way, is attracting millions and millions of dollars right now. It's all happening as we speak. And so we humans are in evolution. Clearly, no doubt about it. We have been now for probably the last, on this trajectory for the last 100 or so years, but it's really increased in the last 50 years, 50 to 60. We're moving from the modern self, the cyborg self, into a transhuman self and into a posthuman self. And the difference between transhumanism and posthumanism is that transhumanism is another type of liberal subject of betterment, like what we are will be vastly improved. Posthumanism says, no, what we are must change because we can transgress boundaries. So posthumanism is a reconfiguration of the human in relation to the environment. And that's what the cyborg means, a new subjectivity. And the posthuman is what is emerging. So let's just take a little look at the posthuman. The posthuman, first of all, it doesn't mean, oh my God, we're not going to be human anymore. What will we be? You can be Westworld, right? You could be androids, humanoids, whatever, you know. But the posthuman is really a new type of human. That's really what it is. By post, it means after the liberal subject, after the autonomous subject. And therefore, it's the end of a certain understanding of the human as one who's autonomous, as one who has one's own will or one's individual agency and choice. That type of person is, in a sense, coming to an end. If we look at it this way, the posthuman, rather than having goals like, okay, I'm going to graduate in 4 years, you know, and get a job, the posthuman is an emergent self, right? So I study, I learn. As I learn, I think about what I want to be. It's a different trajectory rather than just having this automatic goal situation. The modern self has this will, I will to power. The posthuman has, I mean, you know this already. I mean, if I were to just say this to you, right? Your minds are already, in a sense, distributed in your networks. I have my social media friends. I have my Twitter account friends, my Snapchat people, right? So what I am is distributed across the terrains in which I am, in a sense, extending myself. That's a type of distributed cognition in which your embodiment, what you are, is also being extended through these various terrains. And that's different from the old person, so to speak, where we're just mind and body. So the autonomous subject is giving way to a partnership between human and non-human. In a sense, the posthuman looks something like this, right? It's a type of cyborg life. It's the hybridization between the human person and the machine or the device, so that what we are now is extended into our devices or machines. So that it's not, the transhumanists would say, we're no longer human, we're going to become robot. The posthuman says, no, we're human, in which the robot partners with us and us with the robot to extend what we are. Does that make sense to you? Okay, it doesn't. Good. No, it's hard. Is that hard? It's a little bit, right? So it's a way of conceiving what we are in relation to technology, whereby we're not just selling ourselves out to technology, like exporting ourselves, but we're merging with the technology, if I can put it in that way. To put it this way, the posthuman is the electronically embedded person, right? And we have become increasingly electronically embedded over the last 30 years at an accelerated rate, right? I mean, again, from the phone on the wall, I'm now just not wholly holding a cell phone, but what I'm thinking is in that phone, right? In the way that what I'm thinking is in my computer. In a way that, what I am, in a sense, can now be embodied in a robot. So that the robot is, in a sense, thinking as I'm thinking or responding to the way I'm thinking. So it's a type of, a hybrid type of life in which the subjectivity or the subject is distributed rather than located solely in consciousness. Again, I think of younger generations and the way that the cell phone is used in younger generations compared to older generations, right? Younger generations is like, I sleep with my phone. I wake up with my phone, right? My phone is myself. Older generations are like, I have a phone, that I use periodically. It's just a way of relating to the technologies, and the way that we're relating to them is really shifting, and therefore it's shifting, in a sense, what we are. So as Catherine Hale says in her book, How I Became Posthuman, she says, in the posthuman, there are no essential differences or lines of demarcation between body and computer, cybernetic mechanism and biological organism, robot technology and human goals. In other words, as we merge with our technologies, they become a seamless web of human techno entity, right? That line of demarcation is breaking down, so that we can speak of the posthuman as the hyper-personal person, right? Or hyper-personalization. This may look like your life, I don't know, but usually, I remember not too many years ago, but when these technologies started invading our lives, a lot of the discussion was, my daughter, is on the phone and watching television and doing her homework at the same time. And older generations say, how do they do that? How can they do three things simultaneously? And that's because I do think what's happening here, right, as a cybernetic mechanism, is the brain is rewiring for hyper-personalizing life. In other words, we're beginning to, in a sense, map the brain according to multiple integrated circuits of information. So I can be on YouTube, I can be on Facebook, and I can be on Reddit all simultaneously while having a conversation with you or watching television, right? And so it's not a bad thing. All we're saying is the human person is shifting in the way we think, in the way we conceive of ourselves, and therefore it's changing human identity. We can say in the posthuman, human function expands because the parameters of thinking also expand. And so the posthuman thinks differently than the liberal human, if I can use that term, or the liberal subject. So it's not about leaving the body behind or becoming disembodied persons, but it's about a new way of seeing the body as extended into my electronic world in a way that we don't even think about it oftentimes. Now, why this, and where are we going with it? That's the big question. We're breathless on this pace, right? I mean, every year we're running out to Best Buy and, looking at the latest technologies, and I need to get a faster phone, and I need to get a new chip, and we're kind of driven in the way computer technology has infiltrated our lives. And so I want to then, in the last part, maybe say, what is it that's pushing us in this direction? Here I'm going to rely on the Jesuit priest, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Now, Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit who lived between 1881 and 1955. So he's writing like 100 years before, any of this really began to accelerate. But he lived right at the dawn of the computer. And he was really fascinated by what the computer could do for us. And this is really, when he saw the computer, he said, this is the next stage of evolution. And he said, the success of our evolution will not be determined by survival of the fittest, but by our own capacity to converge and unify. Now that's a really interesting insight, right? It's not about competition anymore. It's about convergence. And he saw something that is really of interest to us. For one thing, Teilhard held to the fact that mind, consciousness, and matter are both in nature. That nature itself is mindful matter, always complexifying. So he has that idea that nature is this mind-matter relationship. And he said, this relationship is drawn by a deep energy. He called it an energy that is irresistible, that is attractive, and no matter how you try to get over it, you can't. And he called that love. And he says, this is not about a sentiment of love. This is about the deepest force in the physical world itself. He says, the physical structure of the universe is love. We are drawn irresistibly toward another. We are drawn irresistibly towards centering ourselves beyond ourselves. And so Teilhard begins to ponder these things, and he says, well, what is it that's drawing us beyond ourselves, even to create these technologies that push us beyond what we are? And he said, there's something in nature that is not of nature, but yet centers nature and propels it on to greater wholeness and connectivity. And he called this omega. Now, Teilhard was an evolutionary biologist, but he didn't really hold to Darwin's notion of evolution. He said there's a creative impulse in evolution. And omega, he says, first is that principle of wholeness. There's something in nature that holds the whole together. And when that whole gets challenged, when it's threatened to be fractured, that wholeness, in a sense, rises up. And he eventually will see that omega as God. Now, here's where he begins to see the computer and puts this together. Here's our big story, in case we lost sight. We're in this Big Bang universe, right? We've been in this for quite a while. We're here at the end. I mean, we're just really, really latecomers to this evolutionary story. The whole thing, Teilhard says, has been cosmogenesis, the birth of the cosmos, and then it gave rise to biological life. And then he said that biological life expanded as it began to populate all areas around the globe. And he said now there's no more room to expand. Now it's about contraction. It's about convergence, what he called noogenesis, or the birthing of the mind. So you can imagine that, evolution as this flowering process that begins now to converge in on itself around a point, around a center. And he speaks of that center as the omega center, or the omega point. And he says we're, in a sense, driven by this center of wholeness within us. And we're, in a sense, attracted to this wholeness by the forces of love. And he will eventually see that omega is God. Now, here's what Teilhard does for us. He says this noosphere, this level of the mind, is a convergence of mind as we complexify. But this is exactly what internet is about today, right? I go on Google, I can text you, I can tweet you, I can email you. It's minds meeting minds. And therefore, our world is shrinking around the connection of mind. We know everything that's going on today in Paris, in Iraq, in South Africa, in a way we could never have spoken about 50 or 100 years ago. So we have a higher form of complexity today than ever before. We're more connected today, in a sense, than ever before. And Teilhard says, there is something new taking place here. What he called, we're becoming something new through this convergence of mind, what he called not posthumanism, but an ultrahumanism. And he says, what we're longing for is not just perfect being. And it's true. We can get smarter. Are we happier? No. He says what we long for is more being, right? What we long for is a spirituality, something that tethers us and binds us, and you might say helps make us whole beyond where we are. So Teilhard is on the side of posthumanism. It's not about, in fact, transhumanism scares us. The fact that we can get smarter and robots, we can build super intelligent robots, makes us a little nervous. But what we long for is connectivity. And so Teilhard speaks about the ultrahuman as the interthinking planet, the interthinking humanity. He says, what we can do is realize new possibilities around evolving life on this planet. Wow, that's incredible, right? We can do that. I mean, I look at Facebook today and the way, just looking at the tweets from the Paris fire, and everyone responding. Sometimes good and sometimes not so good, right? But what we can do is we can, in a sense, gather our minds together today, in a sense, for new life. But the question is, here's one example where Teilhard saw the role of technology as one of convergence. The global climate thing, that from young students a few weeks ago, or maybe last month, thousands of students coordinating their efforts, through the internet, through a global mind, through the Noosphere, and drawing together a new collective mind. And that's what we're beginning to see here. That's the Noosphere for Teilhard. But he says, it depends. This can be good, right? Posthumanism and technology can lead us to a new type of planet, a new type of life together. But it depends how we, in a sense, control our spiritual and psychic powers and needs. We can't, in a sense, sell ourselves out to technology. It's to say, do it for us, right? Make us smarter and happier and a more just planet. There's something about us that's required here. Teilhard said technology is not the end. Technology is at the service of spirituality. And I think there's a truth here. And I think what he points to is this. We have, in a sense, developed this stuff because there's something about us. Technology, by the way, is about us. It's not about the tools, right? We constantly seek to transcend ourselves because there's something that's pulling us. There's something that we long for that we do not yet have. And in a sense, Teilhard said, we long for it because, in a sense, religion has fallen out of the modern worldview. Religion doesn't motivate our lives. It's not part of what we are. And Teilhard says, technology really is at the service of spirituality, but to really understand that, we need a new religion of the earth. And he says that's the missing piece. We don't have a religion that meets the needs of our scientific, technological age. So, Teilhard is saying what Phil Hefner says, religion. If we cannot imagine that religion takes shape in technology, then we have eliminated the depth dimension of the most significant development in human becoming. The most profound thing we're doing today is changing ourselves. And without that dimension of religion, of ultimate concern and meaning, we have it's like being on a ship in the middle of the ocean with no captain, no direction, no signals. Where are we going with this stuff, with this technology? So Teilhard had a way to look at this. And what he said is that God, the word God, which really is, the ground of being itself, a personal ground of being, is in evolution. And that's hard for us to get our heads around. right? We're pretty sure God is, if we believe in God, we're pretty sure God is up there, wherever there is. But Teilhard said, nope, there's no God there who's not here. That's called the incarnation, right? The Word became flesh. The Word entered into evolution. And what Teilhard said, this is really radical. Of course, he was a Jesuit, so he could get away with this stuff. He said, not only did the Word become flesh, but God needs us to become fully God. And you're like, what? Seriously, dude, what were you drinking there in France? And that's the thing. This is an amazing insight here. That Teilhard says that God is becoming God as we become more conscious of the ground of our lives, what tethers our lives, what pulls our lives. In other words, God becomes God in and through us, what he called theogenesis. And he says this whole kit and caboodle of mind and matter, this whole rising up of the mind and this increase of consciousness is not about that we can think faster. It's really that we can think towards, you might say, an ultimate being in love, right? Towards an ultimate union in love, towards something more than ourselves, that which grounds us. And so Teilhard sees that this whole universe is, in a sense, a universe that's grounded in personalization. That this whole of evolution, he says, is about the Christ. Right? We this week we're entering into Holy Week, right? Jesus undergoes the Passion. But I think sometimes we have I'm not sure where you are, but sometimes we think Christ is Jesus' last name, like Jesus Christ, like Ilia, Delio. Rather than Christ as, the promise, which is what Jesus is, right? The Messiah, what God's plan is. And in a sense, this is what this whole universe is about. This universe is made for personal being in love. And Christ is that symbol of God entering into this world to become that fullness of being in love. And therefore, Teilhard says we need a new religion of the earth. We, in a sense, have lost religion. We have marginalized it. We've kind of boxed it or put it away. And he says the only way that religion is really possible anymore is if it can first teach us to love and serve with passion the universe of which we are a part. In other words, what are we doing? What are we about in this world of evolution and technology? We should be about falling in love ever more deeply. Right? It's as simple as that. And therefore, he says, if we could find a new religion of the earth in this new sphere of unitized minds, we can planetize. He coined a lot of language. Planetization. We can, in a sense, unite this planet around a hyper-personalization. Right? We see seeds of this already, the way the internet is linking us, but we have no framework to say, well, where should this go? How should this form and to what end? So planetization, Teilhard says, requires that we know that what draws us is already within us, right? And so, what he's saying is that we need to be conscious as person of belonging to a whole. And the only way we can be conscious about being person and belonging to the whole, even if that wholeness is extended with our electronics, is not by living an exoskeletal life, but by putting mind back into matter. And so it's really simple, right? We can be plugged, right? And on our go, but a world of its and bits is just hot, flat, and crowded, right? We're often brain fatigued. You're probably brain fatigued now, but we need to, in a sense, slow down and to know what is it about us that makes us special, right? What is it about each person that makes the person unique? What gives personality to every person? So we need to, in a sense, slow down, unplug, become silent, and go into some solitude. Thomas Merton, that wonderful monk, said, there's something at the heart of our lives, a center, a point of being. And you kind of know this point. Every once in a while, do you ever catch that moment where there's something about, just being? He says, untouched by sin, by illusion, a point of pure truth, like a point or a spark. He says this point belongs entirely to God. It's this little point of nothing in us as our poverty is the pure glory of God in us. There's something of God in us. And that God in us is longing to become fully God in and through us. Or as the Sufi mystic Mansur al-Hallaj said, I saw the Lord with the eye of my heart, and I said, who are you? And he said, yourself. Wow, right? Wow. The only way, in a sense, they're saying, is we can go forth in a posthuman, electronically embedded world, is if we know that we are not alone. Right? That there is one in us who longs to be with us into the fullness of life. And so we do need, in a sense, that kind of slowing down, that meditation, that harnessing the energies of our life in solitude. Teilhard says that this universe and what we are capable of is becoming increasingly cosmically personal. And by that he means that we can overcome all the boundaries that separate us, boundaries of race, boundaries of gender, boundaries of economic disparity, that we can transcend these boundaries and move towards a hyper-personal, as if the cosmos is one large person in formation, that we can think together, we can form a new heart and mind together, if together we have faith in the future. And that's really important for us, that where technology is leading us is not to this kind of apocalyptic scenario, but a new future. And therefore, if we ask the question, can a robot truly love? I hope after this we can have some insight to realize that the robot is, in a sense, an extension of us. We create the robot. We program the robot. So what that robot is for us is either with us, but not against us, right? It's not that, I don't know if you've seen the movie Robot and Frank. This is a great movie, by the way. You really should see it. But Frank here has a little dementia, and his son gets him this robot. And first Frank says, I'm not taking that thing in my house. I don't want that thing. And then Frank, the robot, of course, is programmed to meet Frank's needs. And Frank develops a friendship with the robot because we're relational beings. We long for relationship, right? And you'll have to see the movie to see the whole thing. But the thing is, our technologies can extend what they are. They can enhance what we are, but they cannot replace what we are. That's the difference. Right? And so, love is about giving oneself to another. It's about being there for another. And therefore, it does make a difference how we look at our technologies, how we develop these technologies. If you've seen the movie Ex Machina, you will know that if you want to be a powerful person, you want to, rule with super intelligence, then we'll create robots with precisely those values. And then we bear the cost of what we create, right? Then we have the possibility that what we create could perhaps rise up against us. You see, the creations are, in a sense, mirrors. Technology is a mirror of what we desire. That's what we're saying here. We can create a better world, a new world with technology if we realize that it's not about us, that it's about God, in a sense, with us, becoming something more than either God or us. Becoming, in a sense, a new person in love, a cosmic person in love. So we're part of a whole together. And the question is, does technology make us more whole, or does it fragment us? That's a huge question for us. Are we becoming more lovable because of technology? Are we more aware of what we are in relation to others with technology or not? Love, Teilhard said, is what completes us. Love takes what's deepest in us and joins us together. And that's why Teilhard said, in the end, you can create all the technologies you want. You can be faster, you can be smarter, you can live forever, but you will not necessarily have a better world. Only love, he says, can bring us to the threshold of another world. So after all this, all we have to say is, may we learn to love better in and through our technologies. Thanks.
I don't know if this is a word. Okay, we have time for a few questions, and I can come around if you raise your hand and take questions from the audience. Yes.
I want to thank you and thank you for bringing an incarnational theology, because that was kind of running through my mind when you were bringing up about how human beings can integrate the mind or whatever of technology. And I'm thinking, what is that saying about incarnation when human little infants, they're already incarnate with God. They've had no experience with, technology. So, but I want to just ask about the concept that is being said about needing a new religion. And I wonder if it's more like we need the ancient wisdom of the spiritualities that grasped the holy in all of earth. And,
I think that's a good point. That's a good question. I think Jared would definitely say that's exactly what he's doing, in a sense reclaiming the ancient wisdom traditions, the incarnational spiritualities. But we need to, in a sense, also realize that it's a spirituality in evolution, right? The religion is not just religion as a static, but as a dynamic power of connecting us to the holy, right? To God, within a world of ongoing change and complexity. And that's why he calls it a new religion. Yeah.
I hope I don't embarrass myself by asking this question.
No, don't worry about it.
But where does creation from Genesis fit in with the Big Bang?
Yeah, the whole thing is Genesis. I mean, the whole thing is creation in a sense. So what we are saying is when we talk about God as creator, right, we're talking about that we're saying that what exists doesn't exist by its own inherent power, right? In other words, we know what matter is, but in a sense, matter can't explain its own first principles. And so God as creator means God is the one who brings into relationship that which is. So the Big Bang is not something in the past so much as God is not, as a creator is not in the past. God is the active ground of everything that exists, right? So it doesn't contradict the doctrine of creation at all. It just, in a sense, brings it into a more dynamic context.
In school, grade school, they always taught us, and even in high school and college, about evolution. And I struggle with that.
Yeah, as a no-no.
Because
right?
I believe that God created, as it says in Genesis.
Yeah, so Genesis is a story, right? It's a story that's told for the people of its time to account for how things come into existence, and God as the source of everything that exists. It's not a science book. To use Galileo's words, the Bible tells us how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go, right? So the Bible is not to be confused with science. I mean, that's all that's saying there. So there's no contradiction between the doctrine of creation and evolution, right? These are all we're just saying is evolution is the way God works. I mean, God works, by the way, very slowly. God is quite at home with chaos. God works through the whole kit and caboodle, right? Because God is always that constant ground of relationality, that fidelity and love, so to speak. Yeah. Yes. Here. One here. Here's one here. And then in the back. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation so much. We got a lot to think about. the Noosphere is very much a part of Teilhard's teaching.
Yeah.
Is that I got another two things that and but he did not coin that word, right? It was there before he came.
Yeah.
And the second thing, if you would be so kind to, in case somebody here has not heard that wonderful quote by Teilhard about discovering fire the next
Oh,
time.
yeah, from his essay on chastity. After harnessing the winds and the tidal waves, and we'll discover fire for the second time. Yes, I don't want to kill it. But that's it. Yeah. There's a question in the
we
back
can probably
here.
take one more question. Did you
yeah.
have? There was
Sure,
one, in the back?
one here, and then we'll take the one up there. Yeah. Okay.
Way up there.
Please.
What's refreshing your overall
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, yeah. No, it's a good question. I do think that there is there needs to be an intentionality about technology. And I think one of my caveats is not just to be blind about it, that we're blindly sucked into everything that, comes in our midst. And how do we use it, and what are we using it for? And that's where I'm trying to say if we had a religion or spirituality that could, in a sense, frame technology for us, I think we could move into posthumanism more fruitfully as the flourishing of life. Technology by no means is to be like seen in a negative light, like, oh my God, we're going to be like iRobot. We're going to create these robots and they're going to take us over and we're going to be annihilated as a species type thing. That's apocalyptic thinking. And that's not what technology is about. Nature's not about that. Nature's always about transcending the boundaries towards more being. It's always about moving towards more complex being and complex consciousness. So it's about convergence. Nature has been converging for the last 13.8 billion years. Technology today continues that trend. But we have to make some choices. And I think your question is, how do we move into a fruitful post-human age? And there's where I think we need work in terms of spirituality. How do we bring in that dimension, that depth dimension of life into the conversations, into the everyday awareness of our use of technology? We have work to do here.
Thank you. We will continue. We can continue a little bit of discussion outside. We have some refreshments. We also have books for sale. So please join us. And also please join me in thanking our speaker this evening.